Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Kirsty Jagger joining me. Hi Kirsty.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So some of you might remember Kirsty joined us a few months ago for Author for the Day, so it's good to have you back in the group.
Thank you.
So, a little bit about Kirsty. Kirsty's a journalist by trade. In 2019, she won the inaugural Heyman Mentorship Award, established by acclaimed Australian author Catherine Heyman, for a writer from a background of social or economic disadvantage. And Rose Ghetto is her first novel. It was published in July 2023 by UQP, who describe it as for fans of Douglas Stewart, Sophie Languna, Emily Maguire, MJ Highland, and Jennifer Down. So, thanks so much for joining us. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a bit about Rose Ghetto.
I would love to. So as you said, Rose Go is my book baby. It took me 5 years to make this book baby. And it came into the world in July 2023. So that's very exciting. It's almost been a year and I can't believe how fast that has gone and
Mm,
how much has happened in those months that have passed. So Rose Ghetto is an Australian working class coming of age story, and it follows the trials and tribulations of a young girl named Shayla as she grows up in poverty amongst violence. And it kind of is a breaking the cycle story, breaking that cycle of poverty and trauma and violence. And it's ultimately a story of survival and a little bit dark sometimes. It does ask you
mm,
to sit with some difficult moments, but I really feel the feedback that I've had since the book was published is that Shayla is really relatable, and lots of people like coming up and hugging me because they want to hug Shayla and they want to
mm,
like pick her out of the pages and love her and care for her and protect her, and so a lot of love for Shayla, which I'm very happy to accept on her behalf.
mm.
So it's been a really beautiful journey to have that experience, and also just as a writer to know that you've created a character that people firstly feel is real, but also that they relate to, and that they care for. So it's been a really special moment for me. Yeah, so that's a
Yeah,
broad overview.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
certainly
sorry, you go.
agree with like what you said. I've been reading it myself and probably about halfway through, but yeah, really would love to give Shayla a big hug and check she was all okay. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things I did, there was a decision that was made um, to start at the end. So you
Mm,
do know that Shayla is going to be okay. And so,
mm,
despite the fact that you have to sit with some difficult moments,
mm,
you do know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And, there is that contract with the reader. It is met. She is okay at the end. And I think, in fact, she's probably exactly who she needs to be at the end.
mm,
Um, she's strong, she's resilient. I think she's empathetic. Um, she's not judgmental. I think she's actually a really beautiful character, and I think she wouldn't have become the character that she is without having faced some of the situations that she has faced in that book. So that's been really
mm,
special. Yeah.
mm. And can you tell us a bit about what brought you to write this and what your inspiration was for writing it?
Yes, I had to think about this a little bit. Isn't this horrible that you have to think about your inspiration? But I feel
Mm,
like Rose Ghetto was an idea for such a long time. I think I probably had the first kind of thought of this character in a slightly different story. No, that's probably a lie. In a very different story. Probably about 11 years ago. And you do a few words, and those words are usually really terrible, and you would never share them with anybody. And none of them made it into the final copy of the book. But there was this seed um, of, of of this story, a character similar to Shayla, um, some of the childhood experiences that she had that I wanted to kind of play with. There's also some inspiration that's been taken from growing up in
mm,
Rose Meadow. So Rose Meadow, for those who are, particularly who are joining us from overseas, um, Rose Meadow is a real place. It is set in, it's in Sydney's western suburbs. It's changed a lot over the time since I left, which was, well, don't want to reveal my age, but you can probably get that on Google now. But it was quite a while ago, and I can't do math, so this is where, you know, it's a while. So I grew up in Rosemeadow. I grew up in Housing Commission. I moved around a lot. My family was quite poor, and there were these amazing stories in the community around me. Many years after I left, I went back, and my home had been demolished. The entire street was gone. And I'd actually gone back to try and get some photos and some video of it because I was struggling with the detail. As you mentioned before, I'm a journalist by trade, so my writing is normally very succinct. There's not a lot of fluff. It's kind of short, you know, and to the point. And I was struggling with getting detail, so I went back to the scene to try and capture that detail, and everything was gone. So I had that moment going, oh, okay, so now what do I do with this? But actually, what it kind of gave me was, you know, as you're driving home and you're staring into the abyss going, oh crap, now what do I do with it? I was kind of like, that's a great beginning, that it's gone, that she goes back and she wants to capture these stories. And the reason the estate where I grew up was demolished, and it was demolished quite a significant time after I left, was that there was a riot, and that riot led people to the government to declare it an urban design experiment that failed. And that really stuck with me. That line of being an urban design experiment that failed. And do we experiment with marginalised communities? And at what cost? And so that was the concept that I wanted to play with as well.
An interesting concept, isn't it? Yeah.
So I guess, look, I wanted to preserve a little bit of Rosemeadow. It's gone. That part of it is gone. And we don't talk about that community unless it is in the media for a bad reason. So I wanted to tell those stories through the eyes of a child that's not judging, but is observing the world around her in a you know, an unobstructed kind of way.
So is a lot of what happens to Shayla and things that you might have experienced in your life?
So Shayla, a lot happens to Shayla. And so I would say Shayla is a vehicle for lots of people's stories. And I like to describe the book as a bit of a mosaic. So if I had held up a mirror to my experiences and the experiences of the people around me, and I dropped it, it's been pieced back quite strategically to create a narrative, like a character arc as well. So it'd be really disingenuous to call it memoir. There are elements of it that are personal to me and deeply important to me. And I don't like to go through and pick those out. I think one of the things for me that I really enjoy as a reader is speculating about what is truth and what is fiction, and how much of fiction is based on truth or inspired by. And I think that's part of the joy. So I don't want to take that away from readers. So you can speculate away, enjoy that process. But I think Shayla will feel real for very many characters. And also her mother, Lauren, who is, Lauren was my favourite character to write. She is probably the most complex and layered character in there. I think you've got, you know, your protagonist, who's a good character, she's a young girl. Got an antagonist, a stepfather, Rob. And Lauren, the mother, is this beautiful, complex, endearing, but frustrating character who I just loved writing because it's not black or white with her. She's in this area of grey, which makes her very human. And you kind of want to put your hands into the book and shake her a little bit and wake her up. But I think if you had a friend experiencing similar things to what she is, it's also how you would feel. You would want to say to her, hey, this isn't feeling right. Maybe you need some help. But the reality is, in this book, Lauren is, you know, she's financially powerless, she's socially isolated, she's got mental health problems. She has been a victim of repeated incidents of violence, which have been quite extreme. And, you know, I think also I wanted to play with the idea of re-victimization. So people that have experienced violence are more likely to experience violence again. And particularly young women who have grown up in violent situations, there tends to be a perpetuation of violence in their relationships as they become adults. And it's something that I wanted to look at, how that violence is so insidious and it creeps up. And even if you are quite right and you are doing all the things you can to break the cycle, subconsciously some of those things happen. And we start to see Shayla repeating some of the behaviours that her mother had exhibited. And if you're in the middle part of the book, you'll kind of get to that point when she's an adolescent. But yeah, so there are lots of big concepts in there. They're quite complex and they're confronting, but I think a really important conversation. So I hope this book raises some awareness of those things too.
Yeah. And we've got a few people watching, so just wanted to remind those watching, if you've got any questions for Kirsty, please type them in comments and I can read them out. Sharon's interested to know how much research you needed to do for your book.
I did very little research for this book. I guess a lot of it's written from my experiences growing up in Rose Meadow. Like I said, it's a real place. I lived there for about 5 years. The research that I did mostly was into the Rose Meadow riot, which happened in 2009. I wasn't living in the area at the time, and I wasn't a journalist at the time either. I don't know where I was. Anyway, I was somewhere. Evidently I was somewhere, but I wasn't a journalist and I wasn't reporting on what was happening there. So I had to do a little bit of research there. So the opening chapters of the book where it's quoting the Sydney Morning Herald, these are real quotes from the newspaper when it's recounting the incident of the riot, and it's talking about how many people were involved and how they were injured and what weapons they were used. That's all factually taken from media on those things. I did need to do a little bit of research into the American Radburn design of housing. So this is the kind of housing architecture and urban planning that was used for that estate, which I believe was built in the 70s, and what was ultimately declared an urban design experiment that failed. And also the architect who introduced it, who he also, I'm just trying to find the quote here, he basically said it was an error to introduce it to to Australia. So, interesting thing. A lot of those estates are being demolished at the moment. So really for me, it was about looking at the riot, making sure that the fictional narrative was embedded in realism so that it felt very real and timely for the reader. The other thing was also just going back and kind of mapping out streets as well. So when you read the book, it is very much place oriented, and I would say that Rose Meadow is a character of its own. That the location and the place is a character, and so I was actually gifted this amazing thing where, and I was asked if it was a deliberate decision, but I'm not this smart. But somebody asked me if I deliberately named the streets in Rose Meadow after Shakespeare, and I didn't. But actually, the council did. They are legitimately named after the characters of Shakespeare, and in the neighbouring suburb recalls the characters of Charles Dickens. So it just all kind of came together really beautifully in that. But I was a lazy researcher, and not too much research was done.
And what sort of feedback have you had from readers? Have you had people saying they have experienced similar in their lives, or maybe lived in Rose Meadows and were there during the riots?
Yes, I've had a lot of people reach out, and I was a little bit nervous about putting a book called Rose Ghetto out into the world. I feel like the title, it could be misinterpreted. It is a commentary on the urban design failing of what was there, because they did build ghettos, and also locally there was some social commentary around that. And also the word Rose Ghetto is not used at any other point in the book. The suburb is always referred to as Rose Meadow. And I totally forgot your question.
About reader feedback.
reader feedback. Yeah, so I was a little bit nervous about that. But the feedback that's come back is like, people are like, wow, you nailed the suburb. I lived here. I had a
Mm.
girl reach out to me whose name is also Kirsty, who lived on not that street, but another street that I write about. She was like, hi, I'm Kirsty from this street. And I was there at this point where there was a murder that was committed on that street, and we both remember it. You know, so trauma bonding. But,
Mm.
you know, other people that have reached out and said, like, so the book is dedicated to the gutter kids. And I had a beautiful message that said, this gutter kid thanks you. And that was
Oh.
such a lovely thing, because I was
Mm.
like, you know what, when you read the book, there's characters in there called Charlie and Sean, and they're beautiful young
Mm.
kids. And I think when people read it, they assume the gutter kids are Charlie and Sean, and then I've dedicated the book to them. Charlie and Sean are not real. I created them because I didn't want Shayla to have internal monologues happening. So she's got these big thoughts and these really big conversations about God and purpose and existence, and
Mm.
is someone looking after me, or is it all part of a bigger plan? I didn't want her to have those as internal thoughts. I wanted her to be able to have that dialogue exchange with kids around her same age who are experiencing similar life things to her. So I wanted the book I dedicated it to kids like me who grew up feeling like the books they read growing up didn't reflect them or their situations or their lives. I wanted them to feel seen. And so for someone to reach out to me and say, thank you from one of the gutter kids, that
Mm.
was a beautiful moment for me, of just kind of going, you know, if it, you know, helps one person, if it connects with one person, then I've ticked this big thing off
Mm.
my bucket list. And that's a huge win. Also, a lot of people who have reached in, women who have reached and said, you know, I've had to leave a violent relationship and I really relate to Lauren. And also women who have grown up in homes where there has been domestic violence and there have been children. So
Mm.
lots of people reaching out to kind of go, I relate to this component, and it's an important story to tell, which is, you know, it's magic. I
Mm.
never thought I would ever get published. I wanted to be a writer since I was 10 years old, and so to, you know, walk into a bookshop and see your book on the shelves is just an incredible dream come true, and to have people reach out and say this connected with me is just
Mm.
absolutely the best thing that can happen.
Mm. And yeah, and you said about getting your book published. Could you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, so I had a slightly unusual, I would say, kind of move into publishing. So I, like I said, wanted to write for a very long time. I ended up doing an amazing course. If you're in Australia, there's a writing course, Faber Writing Academy, through Allen and Unwin, and
Mm.
it changed everything for me. Completely changed everything. It's a great course, and I encourage everyone who's taking their writing seriously, like, do it when you're at that point where you want to get real serious, because it's a little bit expensive, but it was worth it. So I was doing that. When I kind of came out of that, I had not a full draft, but I had like a good chunk of words that I was pretty comfortable with, and I submitted it into the Heyman Mentorship Award.
Mm.
And as part of that, and I won that, but as part of that, there was a agreement with UQP that they would do an editorial review and a report. And so it got sent off. It got sent off way later than I was, like, you know, 2 years behind schedule. I'd been working on bushfires here in New South Wales and other natural disasters, so that kept me very busy and I didn't have a lot of time to write. But thankfully UQP took it. And then I got an email and they were like, hey, can we meet and have a chat with you about this? And I was like,
Mm.
damn, maybe it's so bad they don't even want to give me a report because it's going to be so long that they're just going to, like, give me a little call and be like, hey, this is terrible, don't send it to anybody and we never want to hear from you again. So I was expecting this kind of a call, and then they were like, oh, and we're going to bring our publicist, and I work in communications, so I was like, well, that's a better sign. So
Mm.
so we had a meeting and they were like, we would like to buy this book, we're going to take it to an acquisitions committee, And the acquisitions committee unanimously supported it, and which was amazing. And that's kind of how that all happened. That happens about a year out from your book being on the shelf. You go through many rounds of edits, all of which were actually incredible, and I learned a lot. I think it was one of my favorite parts of the process. But yeah, I if your manuscript wins an award before it gets to a publisher, it's probably got it. I don't want to say it kind of pulls it out of that slush pile part a little bit. Like you've got a little notch in your belt, where someone has seen the potential in your writing, who has experience in the industry. So if you're aspiring writers, getting short stories published, getting poems published, getting a little bit of a writer's byline happening, so you've got like a little writer's resume. That's super handy because it means that other people have there's this credibility to your writing because other people have kind of endorsed it across the industry. So I was very lucky that I had that, and that made it a bit smoother for me to kind of take this path. Yeah.
And Jessie wonders if there's been any writers who have influenced your writing.
Oh, I've got a list. Let me scroll down. So I was so ecstatic when you publishing a book for people who are readers. So there's often an advanced reading copy that comes out, and on the back it says who it's who it's for. And you read through the list before, but I didn't see that until it came out. So when I saw the list of authors that they were like, this is for readers of, I was so happy I cried. And then I took myself out for lunch and a wine and like cried at the restaurant. But like Douglas Stewart is one of my favorite authors. And when I read Shuggie Bain, my heart, like it's such a phenomenal book, and obviously it won the Booker Prize, so it is incredibly powerful. And his writing is just so perfect. It's so raw and real and just fabulous. So if you haven't read Shuggie Bain, please do yourself a favor and go and get it. It is incredible. And also Young Mungo which is his second book, is just fabulous as well. Trent Dalton. So Boy Swallows Universe came out when I was starting to write, when I was at Faber Writing Academy. It came out, and I was like, this kind of suburban, lower class, public housing kid growing up in a, rough neighborhood. I was like, I think it was the first time I felt seen. And so that I kind of went, actually, you know what? It kind of, I felt like it gave me permission to keep writing about that kind of lesser seen part of Australian society. And that's been great. I think he's given a voice to lots of people, even his latest book, Lola in the Mirror, where it looks at homelessness in Brisbane. What an incredible way of humanizing and sharing important messages about that space. Such an incredible writer. Also, I really love Helen Garner's writing, like Monkey Grip. Those characters where you're like, I love to hate this character. And it's just such a real gritty kind of thing. So I think you write what you like to read. In particularly in your first book, potentially, kind of like you write what you know. So I knew growing up in that space, I didn't have to do a lot of research. I like reading these kind of books; they speak to me, and so that felt like a natural kind of flow for me. So they're probably the key. Also, I'm so excited. I love talking about books with people. The Lost Files of Alice Hart, incredible, by Australian author Holly Ringland, who I believe is on tour in the US at the moment. The first sentence of that book is just perfect. I don't know that there is a better opening line to a book than that. So, all of these things they're some of the really beautiful books that I love. I've got a whole list, but we will be here all night. Just send me a message. I'm happy to talk about books at any time. Like, I've got so many book recommendations for all of you. I'm so excited to share them. So just drop me a line. I will give you all of them.
No, sounds great. Sharon said she's requested your book from her local library and she's looking forward to reading it.
I love that. And I also just seeing books in libraries, like it's so exciting. I went into my local
Mm,
library and they had it and I made them take a little photo of me with them. Such a
mm,
nerd, but I was so excited to see it there.
yeah. And Belinda's wondering if you're working on anything new.
I am working on something new. I'm about a quarter of the way. Don't tell my publisher because I haven't set any pages yet. I'm about a quarter of a way into a new novel where I'm playing again with kind of an underprivileged, like a girl from an underprivileged background. And I want to play with this concept of happiness and how much happiness we feel we're entitled to when we're doing better than we ever thought we could,
Mm,
but we're not necessarily happy.
mm,
And whether or not we think we're being self-destructive, because that's something that can cycle around, or if we're genuinely not happy and we are entitled to happiness, and so we should throw it all to hell and just
mm,
do what's going to make us happy. And so I'm about a quarter of the way through that at the moment. It's actually moving a lot faster than Rose Ghetto did, maybe because I learned so much during the editing process. I had an amazing editor. So that's great. So stay tuned.
yeah. Sounds
It's a
like it's
little way
an
off, but
interesting concept. Mm,
yeah, and look, I think happiness is something that I think particularly post COVID, I think even during COVID, where I think people really started to look at what in life makes them
mm,
happy
mm,
and often it's really quite simple things, but also often it is not the things that we are told are going to make us happy.
mm. Very
And so I
true.
really want to play with that
Mm,
concept a little bit. So there's a big conceptual kind of idea there that I want to shake down into some really banal, um, everyday kind of experiences. But I think that everyday component is so relatable. And again, it's about your readers feeling seen and connecting
mm,
to an experience that is bigger than them, so that they also feel like they're not alone.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. So, when do you think we'd be able to read that? How much longer will we
Or,
have to wait?
well, I have to finish. So I'm going to get some sample chapters to my publisher,
Mm,
and if they like it, they have first right of offer on it. So hopefully they do like it, and then I'm hoping very ambitiously. But now that I'm putting it on the record, and I do have that journalist training, I really would love to have the first full draft done by November,
mm,
and then if it's in decent enough shape, I would assume it would take a year after that for them to kind of go through the editing and design and
mm,
layout kind of stuff. So it's a little way away, but hopefully it's worth the wait.
yeah.
And hopefully the publisher likes it, and I'm not just having a moment. I'm like, look at my great writing, and it's terrible, because sometimes that can happen. So hopefully that's not the case in this particular instance.
No, that sounds very exciting. And also, I'm just wondering, like with Rose Ghetto, it is very confronting, I'd say, and a lot of emotion in the book. When you're writing things that are emotionally draining, is there something that you need to do to maybe get yourself into the mood to write that?
Oh, I don't know that I've got the best life advice when it comes to this. I have pretty unhealthy habits when it comes to this. Um, so literally writing Rose Ghetto, there was a lot of no dose. I think I was like eating 16 cups of coffee a day.
Mm.
I just didn't sleep. Um, there were some scenes in there that were hard to write,
Mm.
um, and I really struggle with live readings. I try not to do them. I didn't even do one at my book launch because some of the ones that I would choose um, make me anxious,
Yeah.
and so that can kind of
Mm.
derail a reading really quickly. I want to bring the mood down. That's a great way to do it.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so there are some. I sometimes I write to music, and so often if I'm trying to get into a mood and there's a funeral in the book, um, and I listened to that song on repeat while I was. There are a few funerals in the book actually, but there's one in
Mm.
particular where there's an Elvis song playing, and I listened to that on repeat to really kind of bed down that feeling. Um, and I think when you're writing and you're listening to music, the music starts to mean something else to you in the context of what you're writing, and so that
Mm.
can be really powerful. Um, Rose Ghetto is a very musical book. Lauren in the book is like rock chic romantic.
Yeah.
Always got fan t-shirts. She's always listening to music. And there's actually a playlist for the book on Spotify if anyone's interested. Maybe I can I'll pop a little link
Yeah, you have to
underneath.
share that with us.
Yeah, but like the book is so musical that I was like, actually, I'm just going to go through and add all of these songs. And also because Lauren's kind of a product of her time and place. For this new book, I had to write an argument the other day, and it's an argument that I've had, and I was like, I don't want to have this argument. And so two things happened. Firstly, I went on a long walk where the argument is situated in the book. This argument didn't happen in this place. So I was like, I'm going to walk. I'm going to have a little imaginary argument with myself. And so if you see a strange blonde woman walking at Cronulla kind of talking into her phone and just voice recording, that's me. I'm in the process of trying to figure out what I'm writing and kind of getting that dialogue. You know, when you're in the shower and you're having that imaginary argument about what you could have said differently, that's kind of the process that I'm going through there. And then I came home and I had a big glass of wine, put my big girl pants on, and was like, just write it. It doesn't matter if it's shit. You can edit it later. So I think sometimes we get stuck with this idea of perfection and that the sentence must be perfect. And if it's not perfect, then you haven't done it. Just get it down. You will edit it later. And, you know, my rule is like in the mornings I wake up at 5:30. The laptop is on the bedside table. I don't get up. It's like morning pages, but I do it for the novel and I just write. And the aim is 50 words. And it's such a small thing. And usually if you aim for 50, because the bar's really low, then you tick it. Mentally, you're like, yes, I've ticked this off. So you can actually kind of keep going and you're already in a flow. You're in the flow because you've removed the hurdle of writing 1,000 words. 50 words you can write. It doesn't matter what you write. 50 words is nothing. But what it does is it gives you that little link in the chain so that you have something to keep flowing on from. So, yeah, there's, you know, just, it's probably not the best health advice, but just have a big glass of wine or whatever your chosen thing is, coffee, tea, iced, whatever, and just do it. Because I think you sometimes just need to, no one may ever read it, so it doesn't matter if it's perfect. You might be the only person who ever sees it in this form. Just put it down. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if anyone else likes it.
And yeah, and what you said, like you must have a very busy life outside of writing and everything. How do you set aside set times for your writing, or how do you plan to fit your writing into your life?
Yeah, and look, I have a pretty interesting job. So afternoons are a no-go. So at the end of the day, I'm tired and I've got nothing left to give to my writing. Knowing that, I wake up at about 5:30. I write to about 7:30. I then walk the dogs. I start work at 8. And then if I've got, you know, a lunch break in there where I can get a few words down, I do. But I think that morning bit is the important part because it kind of, if you write in the morning, then through the day you're kind of thinking about what's next and that scene and little parts of it. You might get a little snippet of dialogue. And so you're kind of subconsciously working on it anyway. So when you come back to it the next day, it's there. Also, sometimes I get into bed and the dialogue will come to me and I just email myself. So often there is like messages or emails at like 3:30 in the morning. So I'm like, I can't forget this intrinsic part of dialogue. So, you know, keep a notebook by the bed, do all of those things. But yeah, I tend to have to write early in the morning.
And do you have a favourite place to write?
Bed. Bed. So look, in the mornings I do write in bed because I don't want any distractions. So the laptop is literally next to me so that I do not have to do anything except turn it on and write. I don't move for 2 hours. Ideally, someone brings you a coffee. My dogs can't do that, so you know, no coffee for the first 2 hours, but no distractions. So I do not move. I read On Writing by Stephen King, and he's got this beautiful analogy of when he became quite famous. He bought this like big oak desk, and he was like, I'm going to write at this very artistic, very like writerly thing, and he couldn't get anything out. Now he's got like a tiny little desk and kind of writes at that. I think just write where you're normally kind of working, because it sets your brain already sits down there and it knows that's where you work, and so you kind of flick into work schedule. Or sometimes Pip Williams, who wrote the Dictionary of Lost Words, I listened to her talk recently. She loves cafes, so she'll go to a cafe and she doesn't let herself have a sip of coffee until she's written one word.
Oh,
Her
okay,
holiday,
yeah.
one word. But I mean, if you've read Pip Williams' work, every word is golden. So her one word a day goal, every word is just perfection. So, you know, I'm at 50 words, so you might get a good sentence out of me. So yeah, I think if you can, I mean, it depends as well. If you've got kids, you probably need to get out of your house to do it, because they're going to be yelling and screaming at you and all of those types of things. But I tend to like to write in bed and be lazy and comfortable.
Yeah. No, sounds great. Well, thanks so much for joining me. It's been great chatting to you. Looking forward to finishing Rose Ghetto and reading more of your books.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have done this with you guys. And book recommendations, hit me up in the comments. I will send all my book recommendations.
Yeah.
And I'll pop the Spotify
and
too.
Yeah, looking forward to all that. And thanks for the people who ask questions as well.
Yes, thanks for keeping the nice questions too. Sometimes I get hard questions. I'm not smart enough for this. Thanks for being kind to me at this time tonight.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, and bye, everyone.